Anyway, let me try this again. Good morning and welcome to our second in a series for principals and school counselors. Today's topic is Mandates Matter, how the regulations impact the school community. And again, I'd like to welcome all of those people who signed up. We've had really good response to our series and registration. And again, welcoming our presenter, Carol Day here.
Morning.
Who's here? Yay, there she is.
She's here.
After some galaxy-wide travel in the last couple of weeks. Anyway, I'm not going to spend much time doing introductions, but on behalf of NISCA and our public, our professional development committee, and Dr. Gail Reed Barnett, who says she may be able to join us this morning, we'd like to just get started this morning. So thank you, Carol.
You're welcome. And Bob, I'm just getting into screen share. So
Okay.
Folks, just a half a second here. There we go. Okay. And it is working. All right. Good morning, everybody. And as Bob mentioned, I was coming back from a conference and with a canceled flight, not too much fun when you know you need to be here this morning. But I appreciate everyone here on this, at least downstate, this rainy, gloomy Monday. So hopefully we'll have a little bit of dialogue and conversation just to mix things up a little bit on Wednesday or hump day. So just a couple of things. I'm going to move right into our screen share. Okay, can everybody see? Thumbs up. Those of you who I can see, just give me a thumb there. Thank you. A nod of the head. Appreciate it. So just a couple of housekeeping things. I know you're in school, so it's difficult to keep your computer muted. So to the best of your ability, that would be awesome. Questions. Please put them in chat as we're going along. We plan this to be a very tight, concise, 45-minute workshop so that everybody can get back to life, back in our schools as soon as we're done. So for the best of your ability, again, throw those questions in chat. Bob will monitor. If anything hot comes up, we'll answer it right away. Thank you, Dr. Rotunda. And last but not least, at the end of the presentation at 10:15, Bob and I will stay on for as long as you need, and we'll go through some more of the questions that we didn't get to. And this will all be recorded. You will receive it probably tomorrow, along with all of the handouts from today. And then, of course, as Bob Rotunda mentioned, we are recording. So yes, mandates matter. And for those of you in the room that are school counselors, and I'll give a shout out to a whole bunch of you that I know when I saw your faces this morning, we have been working on regulatory changes in New York State since before 2000. Our last regulations for school counseling practitioners, certification and preparation programs happened in 1978. So folks, all of you know, nothing in education could ever stay around that long without change. So finally, and now it appears that these mandates, and hopefully we'll have some research soon as we are into the third year across New York State, the second year of implementation for New York City. Hopefully, we'll start to see a significant difference in the impact of a school counseling program on students. So just getting back to the purpose of today, counselors and principals together make magic, but it's about vision. It's about knowing what we need for our students. A school counselor and a principal both have the big picture of what's going on in their building. And I say that because not being confined to a classroom, and I don't mean that in a negative way, you can step back and you can feel what's going on. You can feel the climate. You can feel the ups and the downs. Counselors have a sense of that as well as our principals. So together, when we dialogue and we communicate well and we talk things out and we do some good collaborative planning, well, we can create just about everything we want in our building. And of course, it's going to start with a positive school climate, which impacts our culture. So we're going to cover 6 things today. Many of you may know these already, but I'm going to just review them in a little bit more detail than what we went through last week. Last week, we briefly just went over all the state expectations. For many of you, you knew that, might not have been something new. Today, we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into a couple of these things. So we're going to talk a little bit about change, because when a program changes in your school community, it impacts everyone. The second is we'll talk about Tier 1 expectations, and that's really the crux of the changes in the school counseling program. The IPR, which I know stresses everyone out. How in the world am I going to meet with all of my kids for these individual conferences? Having been a school counselor and a supervisor 22 years in the schools before I went over to the far side of higher ed, believe me, I understand. And we were trying to do this work, believe it or not, comprehensive counseling in the 90s under Commissioner Sobel. For any of you that are long timers, we almost got there. We'll talk a little bit about the school counseling curriculum, which is now a better organization than the random lessons that many of us were delivering. Though many of our schools do use programs and curriculum to meet the needs of all their kids. We'll talk a little bit about the advisory council. I'm going to try and give each one of these topics about 10 minutes, and then some of the tools. And then we'll do some linkage towards what we're going to talk about next week, which are mostly about measurable outcomes. So NYSED has 5 key expectations. This is not the entire ASCA model. Counselors, you know that. It takes 5 years to pour through the whole ASCA model and get it in place. But we're taking parts of it in New York. We're taking the most important parts. First, we will have a comprehensive program for our kids. That means a written document with activities aligned with standards with measurable outcomes. That's in a nutshell. Second, very important, all kids will have access to a certified school counselor. We know many of our elementary schools still do not have a school counselor. It is difficult for districts to go out and just hire it like that. Many of our suburban and rural districts are adding 1 counselor a year for their elementary schools, which is great. New York City is also adding elementary counselors. Suhani Perez-Sadler is with us today, and she's the person who is taking on all 3,300 New York City counselors and making these changes this year. So if she can jump in later, we'll invite her to speak to us. If not, maybe next week. The IPR, the individual progress review for today, and the school counseling. It's still called core curriculum. I'm not sure why, but school counseling curriculum in grades K-12. And then, of course, the direct services. ASCA recommends 80% direct services. We do not have that mandate in New York, but if we're implementing this kind of a program, for sure, we are delivering at least 80% direct services to students and the indirect services on behalf of students. So let's throw this in chat if you can. I don't want to take the time to try and process it. How does the current school counseling program, your new program, how is that impacting your community? What change have you seen happen? Maybe we could throw that in chat. And Dr. Rotunda, if you see anything there, maybe we'll just do a couple of shout outs. But what changes are you seeing that are different this year with your school community? Just throw something in chat. There's got to be some difference this year. For example, more school counselor teacher collaboration. I'm seeing a lot in chat here. More focus on mental health needs, increase in parental involvement. Good morning, everybody, again. Teachers are more aware. SDL, more focus on collaboration. So folks, as you're putting in these into chat, and we will capture them, the reality is mandates do matter because it forced all of us, not just school counselors, to change. And change is not easy for anyone, but also for the rest of us, our administrators, our APs, our deans, our principals, to better be aware of the work of the school counselor, and more importantly than the role, I'll be honest with you, the impact of the program on students. And then last but not least, will these amendments and the new expectations, how are they affecting your school community? Building administrators, drop in chat, what do you hope will happen? School counselors, what do you hope will happen? Not waving a magic wand and thinking this will happen overnight, but what do you think, or what are you hoping will happen now because of these changes? So we're seeing my schools become more proactive. Students get more access to a school counselor. Thank you. We can understand the needs of our students. We're doing a much, well, COVID, I think, put the spotlight on that for us, didn't it? And the real advisory council, I mean, I'll just share this with you. I worked in Sawanica in the mid-90s, and we had an advisory council, and it met at 7:30 in the morning, which was painful for me as the school counselor and as the supervisor of the program. But we had parents and students, student representative from each grade level. So that advisory council kind of, made us put our money where our mouth is. And thank you, grad students. Yes, it is better aligned with what you're being taught. So I'm going to move on. And again, we've captured that. Thank you, folks. But the reality is these mandates will matter ultimately. So we all know that our teachers were using response to intervention, RTI. Counselors were using PBIS. I like to think of multi-tiered systems of support as that collaboration and relationship, a partnership between RTI and PBIS. So this is what it looks like from the counseling perspective. So we have our tier 1, and the bottom line is that was the big push from NICED when these regs were finally adopted in 2017. They wanted to see more programs for all kids, that school counseling was not just for kids, I hate the word, but I'll use it, at risk, or students with helicopter parents. Though a friend of mine once referred to helicopter parents as lawnmower parents because they're kind of pushy. But the reality is many of our school counseling activities were in tier 3 and some in tier 2. And counselors, this is a great opportunity for us to reach everybody and for all students to know your name and for you begin to learn all of theirs, even with a caseload of 400 or more. So the curriculum, IPR, are all now part of tier 1. Our small groups, collaboration and consultation, tier 2, co-facilitation, and then our individual counseling, tier 3. So again, our work now mirrors the work of our classroom teachers, but the reality is this was always the model that we used in school counseling. Even a million years ago, last decade, when I got my training, we always worked with individual, group, classroom, and large group. So let's take a quick look now at one of the Tier 1 activities, the IPR. We know we're meeting with each student individually, but it's for all students in grades 6 through 12. Now, the IPR is intended for you to connect with your students and principals. This is important, that this individual conference is not meant to be a counseling session. It's a touch base. Think of it as an advisement session. It's an opportunity just to get a feel for where the student is around their academic development, their SEL development, and of course, their college and career readiness. This is not meant to replace the IEP. Counselors, I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but we should gain from this some sense of whether or not our student is moving towards some of those IEP goals. Let me reiterate, the IPR can only be conducted and facilitated by a certified school counselor. The regulations are very specific about that, and that's important. It makes us, it forces us, or we welcome this, to have that individual time with each student. I was speaking to a couple of my colleagues who are middle school counselors, and they said those 6th grade conferences really opened up a can of worms in better understanding how my students were feeling insecure, were worried, were not adjusting well. And it gave me a lot of impetus to set up some follow-up counseling sessions. So at least once a year is huge for many of us. And then again, in the old days, way back, pre-2019, before the regs went into place, we did these IPRs. We called them annual reviews, but we could do them in small groups. That was the difference. Now they're meant to be individual. And I remember as a district supervisor coming up with forms so we could capture where our students were. And now we're lucky we can do everything electronically. So just a reminder, once a year, to the best of your ability. And we put together for you just a couple of prompts, and we're going to send you that handout tomorrow, which is a summary of the IPR, a summary of maybe some guided questions for those of you who are new at that, or those of you who are in grad school and will be starting your positions this fall, and for our principals, so you get a better sense of what the counselors and the students are discussing in an IPR. The purpose, of course, is to make sure our students will get the supports they need between their academic development, between their college and career readiness, and also a check-in on their SEL balance. Let me suggest, and this is what happened last year, that the IPR meeting should be conducted in person. But last year, and if your class goes into quarantine, or if anything else happens with COVID, many of us conducted IPRs through Zoom, through Teams, through Google Classrooms last year, and even by phone. So many counselors were feeling very stressed over how am I going to do this? Well, we managed last year, and hopefully all of these conversations will be able to take place this year. So again, we have a packet for you. You'll be receiving that. Dr. Hunt is amazing. He and I will have everything out to you. He will have everything out to you. I just have to send him the final PowerPoint for tomorrow. So let's get into the next topic. And that's our school counseling curriculum. Years ago, many of us, including myself, would say, we old-timers or long-timers, I didn't go into school counseling to teach. Well, this is different because now we've had standards since 1997. We now have the ASCA mindsets and behaviors, The most recent edition came out last summer in 2021, and the purpose of this is to align our work with national standards the same way our teachers do. So since the late 90s, we've been aligning school counseling programs, and the only way to reach all students was by some classroom lessons. And now we realize that by structuring it differently, by making it developmental, meaning that it moves sequentially from grade level to grade level, that by the time our students leave 12th grade, through these 13 years of kindergarten through 12th grade, school counselors are able to provide our students with knowledge and skills around, again, academic growth, SEL development, which is critical, as we all know, and college and career readiness. And so the best way to deliver this, the most effective and efficient way, of course, is going to be through the classroom. Now, that requires close collaboration. It requires teachers and counselors to find common time to be able to work together. Some of you are delivering this through your advisory programs, another great way of delivering these activities and the curriculum. Last but not least, we should not be creating a curriculum in a vacuum. We should be working with our teachers and our principals and our APs and our deans to be looking carefully at what the data tells us around student needs. So let me pick this up for a minute. Before we unpack that, what do you folks think? The curriculum can only be delivered by school counselors? True or false? Let's see what you're thinking. Super false. I like that. So we're going to jump back out of chat in a second. So the reality is, the drum roll, and everybody's waiting in anticipation. False. The counseling curriculum is delivered by school counselors in collaboration with our teachers and other educators in our building. And that includes our social workers, our school psychologists, other professionals that are part of our school faculty. Now, why is that so? Well, the regulations, and I'm going to be candid with you, we're going to be sending you a copy. Again, though some of you do have it, the 2018 guidance to the regulations. It's very specific. It does say our health teachers, our CTE teachers, some of our specialized classes are also working on curriculum issues very much related to the school counseling curriculum. And in many of our schools, SEL, our social emotional lessons, are also being delivered by our teachers. Counselors, you need to coordinate this and organize it. And that's why we went over our program mapping tool last week. We'll go through it again so you can see where the curriculum is happening, how it's happening, and quite honestly, where the gaps are. So counselors, you're going to coordinate this. You're going to organize it. You're going to do the gap analysis. But a lot of us in our school buildings are delivering some of these lessons. Again, if you have an advisory, our advisory programs, as we all know, everyone's involved, and these lessons can be delivered in that manner. And again, the regulation is at the bottom, and we'll be sending that to you again because it's important, especially for our principals, to know. It's really important for you to know where the basis of this is. And we're well aware, building principals, school administrators, school leaders, that Stata didn't email you every week, that they sent you 2 notices, one in 2017 and then a memo in January 2018 from Renee Ryder. And that's not a lot of a notification, but NISCA, thank goodness, took the ball, ran with it, and since 2018 has been doing a series of workshops. New York City school counselors since 2018, Suhani Perez-Sadler, Dr. Suhani Perez-Sadler, has been organizing workshops across New York City for the same reason. So let's get a feel for what you're currently doing. And let's share a little bit. Maybe some of us will see some programs we haven't heard of. What programs and curriculum and/or curriculum are you currently using in your building? We know a lot of you are using Harmony. Some of you are using Second Step. Many of you are using Naviance at the secondary level. But let's share a few. What are you currently using? Let's throw those into our chat. Go back up for a minute. My screen wants to go without me. I see, again, Harmony, Second Step. Anything new here? Ruler, okay. 8th grade seminar. Leader in Me, excellent. Everyday speech, don't know that one. 7 Habits, oh, I forgot about that. 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. Core Essentials. There's a lot more here to look at. Restorative Circles. Anybody using Overcoming Obstacles? The 4 R's. Habitudes. That's something new for me also. Leader in Me. So folks, keep them in there. Program for our elementary, and we'll certainly have a bunch for you today, Michael. So keep them coming if you have something unique and different that we haven't put up there already, because certainly many of us are looking for programs. And again, remember, it's 3 levels. It's SEL, it's our academic motivation, and it is also college and career readiness. And to incorporate some of that college and career readiness with our little ones as early folks as kindergarten. And we know we can have a lot of fun. We also know elementary counselors, you know your 2nd grade teachers and your 1st grade teachers do a lot of work about the community. So you can incorporate community resources and what's in my community also around college and career readiness. The little ones do have a lot of fun with that. So let's go to the next slide. Here we go. Counselors, let's recognize you already have curriculum in place. You've been doing it for years. We have at the high school level, gosh, a million years ago, I would do 9th grade goal setting with my students. We would do transition workshops with our seniors to get them ready to go off for post-secondary opportunities. We were often doing adjustment and making new friends for our 6th graders. 4th graders, we might have been doing study skills and how to take notes. So we've been doing a lot of this in collaboration with our teachers and our school community for years. SEL, folks, you all know, is a state mandate. It's actually a national mandate. It came out of the Every Student Succeeds Act, which President Obama signed, like right before he left office, which was the last update of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. So we know we've been incorporating all of that into our school days. And that's also hopefully made a huge difference in our school climate and reduced bullying. Our curriculum is delivered through classroom instruction, and sometimes we use small group activities. But by small group activities, we do not mean group counseling. That's a little different. The mindsets and behaviors, and Dr. Rotunda, let's send those out again, because we may have a lot of people here that haven't seen the 2021. and we'll make sure that's in your packet. Whoops, folks, my screen is going without me. The curriculum creates opportunities for your students to achieve the mindsets and behaviors. And here's the best news of all. NYSED does not require a specific number of lessons for each area or each grade level. That's up to you to decide with your collaborators. So that's why it's great to have a team of people, elementary counselors. Maybe you're meeting with your third grade teams, your fourth grade teams, or your grade level meetings. Middle school, we have teams oftentimes speaking with your sixth, seventh, and eighth grade teachers and finding out which we focus on as we're planning for next year. And high school, same thing. We often meet with our departments, the academic departments, and get a sense of what the needs are. Again, this is May, and we're into September already. Sorry to do that, counselors. I know we haven't had summer break yet, or building principals, but this is the big planning time to get ready for next year. I want to show you something that NYSCA and New York City, and I do a little shout out, NYIT did, and I'm going to jump in right now. But a year ago in March, and I'll just talk my way as we open up this website. A year ago in March, I sort of made my class, my school counseling program class, the Ask a Model class, learn how to write lessons, and we got a little carried away. Jennifer Silkman's on, and she and Sharon Usher, both of them have been working on this project for a long time. We started again last spring. NYSCA picked it up in the summer. New York City Department of Ed also began to fund school counselors to review these lessons. So we had 3 steps. We identified the lessons, we organized the lessons, and then we vetted the lessons. So I am now on the NYSCA website, and it's nysca.org. I have that link for you in a bunch of different places in this presentation. But as you can see, there's a tab here that says curriculum.
Carol.
Yes, Bob.
I don't know if that page is shared. I think I still see the PowerPoint. You got to share and unshare.
Okay, let me do that. I thought it moved with me.
Nah.
Okay, sorry.
Zoom's not that smart.
I thought it might be. Let me just come out of this. Sorry, folks. Dr. Rotunda keeps me honest. And let me make sure that it will share. nysca.org. Okay. Bob, is it up now? Let me do a new share to play it safe. Sorry there, folks. Okay. That should be working now, I hope.
There you go.
All right, good. Yeah. I thought the link was going to work. All right, NYSCA homepage. So here we go. Curriculum. Slowly it opens.
Uh-huh.
Oh, wow.
Dun, 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 dun.
I know. Everything was running smooth before. Oh, hallelujah. Okay. School counseling, K through 12 curriculum. You click for the lesson plans and bingo. We now have 312 lessons available for you to use to help build your curriculum. I say help build because many of you have lessons in place and a curriculum in place already. I'm just going to open up one grade. Let me go to 5th grade here just for a second. 3 categories: academic, CCR, SEL. I'll click on SEL, and there are 8 lessons. And when you open them, they are on the brand new lesson plan from ASCA. Also came out last summer. It has everything you need in here, the standards, the materials you need, the links to the materials, the script, introduce the lesson, communicate the objective, the content, how to practice the content, how to summarize it, and then small group or the entire class, 30 to 35 minutes. And at the end, this was a lesson adapted from Harmony. The source of the lessons are all there. So folks, I know our time is precious today, but I urge all of you, urge you to go in there and play. This is a great time for you to be able to go back. And again, time of the year to begin to build that curriculum so you've got everything you need in place for next year. Let me go back to the slideshow. Okay, somebody give me a thumbs up. We're back on. Nod of the head. Okay, thank you. All right, so lesson plan template will also come to you. No worries. The lesson plan template is the brand new one from ASCA. When they updated the mindsets and behaviors last summer, and this was released at the ASCA conference, that's when they also released the new template. So you'll have both of those. All right, let's take this last big topic, advisory council. And many of you have had an advisory group in place for years. As I mentioned, Sewanaka School District on Long Island, 20 years ago, we started that. Meets at least twice a year. The purpose of the advisory council is to provide advice, input, feedback. But can I be honest with you, school counselors, this is a great public relations source for you, because now it's folks not just within the school, but maybe local community business organization. I had a representative from my Lions Club and from my local Rotary on my advisory council. We had our primary mental health CBO, community-based organization, sit on our advisory council. I had my Boys and Girls Club executive director sit on my advisory council. So that would be maybe for a district council, but for a building council, it can be a little bit smaller. Include some students. Students have a lot to tell us. Include members from your PTA and maybe again, community mental health organization. But the work of the advisory council is to support us, help us understand what else might be missing from the program, and also advocate for us. Our advisory council creates an annual report, a brief report, maybe a page of their fall meeting and their spring meeting. In New York City, those advisory councils take place through the executive superintendent's office, and then those reports go to the chancellor. In our suburban and rural school districts, the annual report usually would go to the Board of Ed. So what is the advisory council actually doing? Well, let's just take a look at these elements. First, review your work this year, even if it wasn't formally, you haven't quite formally gone through all the outcomes. When you meet with your group, get a sense of what your program goals were and what you tried to accomplish, and get a sense of how are we doing. Maybe some of you will have some great outcomes by the end of the school year. Talk about how the program supports your school improvement goals, building administrators, how does the school counseling program support the district goals? In New York City, how does the school counseling program support the CEP, the Comprehensive Education Plan? How are we going to revise our plan for next year? You know, counselors, you just need to do a little kickback, reflect, revise, and think through what might be different for next year. Many of us didn't get through everything last year and this year, quite honestly, because of COVID. And then, of course, let's make sure that all students have access to a certified school counselor. And if you don't, in your building, in your district, what are you doing to make that happen? Or what is your district doing to make that happen? Best practice, of course, would be a counselor building. But we know, again, with funding, another unfunded mandate from NYSED, we know how those go, especially those of you who are administrators. Slowly but surely, we hope over the next couple of years, every building will have a certified school counselor. Now, another very important mandate are, again, these mandates matter. So, for example, the advisory counselor, 100% of the schools in our district will deliver a comprehensive program. To the best of our ability, all students will benefit from the IPR. To the best of our ability, we'll deliver a school counseling curriculum in grades 6 through 12. To the best of our ability, all students will have access to a certified school counselor. Remember, folks, this is the second year of implementation in New York City, the third year across the state. ASCA always reminds us it takes at least 3 to 5 years to make all these programs changed, put them in place, check on our outcomes, and collaborate in team with our colleagues. Remember earlier, when we dropped in chat, we said that there is an impact on the school community. Change is not easy. We do have tools available for you. Again, we're going to send you a bunch of tools today. We sent some out last week. We'll make sure that by the time these sessions are finished, that we'll have a folder for you. Dr. Rotunda and I will work on that to make sure everything we've discussed is available. But we have a program mapping tool to help you write your activities down, align them with the standards, and put your outcomes there. IPR review, we're going to send that tomorrow. The whole lesson repository, nisca.org. And then, of course, a little more information about the advisory council. And we can find out a little bit more about that under schoolcounselor.org. That's ASCA's homepage. And there is a section on the national model. There also are a lot of tools available to us from the national model that are free. So it's great that we have lots of free resources. Okay, let's take a step back as I'm watching the clock. That again, NYSED has 5 major regulatory changes. And as you can see, these mandates have mattered. We have paid attention across New York State. New York State has right now the strongest certification, preparation changes, as well as practice in the nation, because we waited so long. We were the 48th state in the nation to actually make changes to our practitioner requirements. Each school will deliver a comprehensive program. All students will have access to a certified school counselor. Again, the IPR, to the best of our ability. I know many of you are scrambling to try and get that requirement finished. Implement a curriculum, and now you have 1 million lessons to fill in those gaps for you. So if you're using Harmony, you now have CCR lessons, and you have academic lessons to be able to use. And then, of course, more direct services as opposed to indirect. And we'll spend a little more time on the measurable outcomes and the direct services, indirect services next time. So again, the resource packet, I'm not going to go over that again. If there's anything we're forgetting, Dr. Rotunda and I will make sure we get that to you, and that will be emailed to you directly. I'm going to ask all of you, and Dr. Rotunda, if you could put this link in chat. Give us some feedback, please. Let us know what you need more of. That is super important because I can adjust next week's presentation and the fourth one. And then, of course, we're looking ahead to plan for next year. So next week, we will work on the ABCs of outcomes. And next week, the week after, we will talk about taking ownership and setting up our programs for next year. I'm going to stop there for a second and also drop this link in chat. And I've got a minute or here before we go into our Q&A. And just wondering, and again, we'll drop this in chat, the exit link. If anybody wants to add, Dr. Perez-Sadler, I didn't know if you'd like to share any thoughts, or next week, maybe join us. And we're going to get into the Q&A just in a minute, and I'll just drop the survey in again. So I think we're ready for questions, Bob.
I have to unmute myself. I picked up a couple questions. This was an interesting question. Does access to a school counselor address the recommended 1 to 250 ratio? With 450 students, they have access, but it's limited. And then she said, we are working to advocate for another counselor in our building.
Okay. So I see a question also about the survey, and I'll jump in on that right now and see what the problem is. No, New York State did not address access. And we know that's a problem. What New York State did was just require a counselor in each building. ASCA does recommend 250 to 1. We know many of our schools do have a 250 to 1, but many don't, especially at the elementary level. I think I'm going to be honest with you. Once you get your program in place, I would expect and I would hope that over time, your principals will recognize the importance of school counseling and begin to make sure that we have a ratio and a staff that makes a difference. And I know it's really difficult for many of you with large numbers. So honestly, I think that's why the most important thing is that we'll do our best to keep encouraging our building principals and our school districts to increase the number of counselors. But I'm going to suggest for many of you, please, let's first get a counselor in every building. I know some elementary counselors on Long Island where it's one school counselor and they're running to 5 buildings. So that's not access either. So slowly but surely, let's do our best to work on it. I see some responses coming in. I'm just wondering if the survey is working now.
I put the link back in the chat again.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
I see, it's also interesting. I see a lot of people responding to each other's questions. It's kind of cool. Is New York State requiring a counselor at all levels? Okay, New York State is not requiring a counselor at all levels, but it's interesting in that there's lots of other organizations and agencies that are involved in the idea. Everyone from the state senate to the state comptroller's office recently put out a news release on school counselors and psychologists and social workers around the state. I got a call from the Buffalo TV station yesterday wanting to do an article or wanting to do a piece on the issue. So there's lots of interest in it. The PTA is behind it. So it's not just us in the wilderness kind of talking about it. There's lots and lots of information, especially since the pandemic. So that's kind of good news. Is we're not just alone. Let me see if I had other questions. Is there an appropriate situation for an IPR where it could be held in a small group? I have an answer, but.
I'll answer first.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks, we see somebody did edit. They put their county in the line where it said county. So on the survey, the feedback, the exit form, the second question was county. We want to make sure that we're reaching all of our folks across the state. No. So the answer to that question, I apologize, is just a flat out no. We used to be able to do it in small groups. State Ed is saying to us individual. This came about because somebody on the Board of Regents way back in 2014 had a complaint from his family that his niece never saw a school counselor. And that was the impetus to make sure that some of these activities would be conducted individually. Can the role of a school counselor fill the role, can the role of a school social worker fill the role of the counselor? Not for the IPR folks, and not for the supposedly the question we just spoke about, access. There is supposed to be a certified school counselor in every building, but when you when there is a social worker who only is trying to do everything that the counselor would do, our social worker would be delivering some of the curriculum. Our social worker would be providing individual counseling and group work, but not the IPR. And then, of course, it would make the difference with access. So I believe, or at least we had heard, that New York State, NICED, was beginning to update the school social work regulations. I'm not quite sure, but there is supposed to be a school counselor available. That's the word. That's what made it difficult. Available to every student in your school building. Dr. Rotunda, you have a take on this?
Not really. I think that when you talk about IPR, it goes back to the previous iteration of it. When we're talking about grades 6 through 8 kids, the school counselor is responsible for it, and it's got a whole bunch of good reasons to do that. It can't be delegated to someone else, and it shouldn't be delegated. It shouldn't be done in small groups because it's an individual assessment where you're getting to you're getting to know the kid, but you're getting to know them for long term. And as the record is produced, and I remember in our school when we did these, the record is produced and it moved up to the high school counselors who got to know the kids through our work with them. And so I wouldn't want to delegate that. In regard to how the curriculum is delivered, there are some words in the guidance document that really carve out part of it for school counselors to do, that really shouldn't be delegated either. The guidance document, and this is a quote from it. We can quote from guidance documents all day. The program must include lessons provided in classes and or small groups addressing specific and relevant student competencies. And I think what they're relating to, mindsets and behaviors, are those student competencies in college and career readiness, academic skills, and social emotional development. These lessons must be provided by a school counselor. And that gets down to the manpower you have If you've got a school counselor who's available to do those lessons, perfect. You can cross that, you can check that off. If you haven't got a school counselor in your, and we had this situation in my old district, we created the lessons. They were provided by someone else in the elementary schools because there weren't any elementary counselors. And I think you have to look at each case individually. There's lots to be said on that. We're getting lots of questions about that.
And Bob, let me just reiterate, what you said was really important because this is supposed to be the IPR, an individual dialogue.
Yeah.
And it's not a group counseling session. It's really your opportunity. And I'm going to suggest, folks, it does not have to be a long session. We can do counselors. We know this, a good check-in with our kids in 10 to 15 minutes. So it's tricky. You do the best you can do, and do your best to meet every kid in New York City. Starting in grade 6, there is a tracker, STARS tracker, that they are using so that that information does flow from grade level to grade level right through high school. And for many of you also, work collaboratively, or maybe you've done this already, to come up with some system that information will flow from 6th grade to 7th to 9th to 12th. And so again, access to a school counselor. I see somebody's using a phone. Somebody's else is sending a counselor from another building on an as-need basis. But it's tricky. It's just going to take us time, folks. Unfunded mandates. And Danielle, IPR signed up a student, that's up to you. You'll create a form in your district or a database to keep this information. But, if you want to provide something to the student, a copy, I'm sure we can do that. I'm sure you'll be able to figure out a way of doing that. Assembly.
Go ahead.
Yes. No, I was just going to say assemblies would be part of the information, but perhaps after that assembly, you can create a follow-up lesson for every teacher to deliver. Then it becomes really legitimate. And the kids were not asleep during the assembly or playing on their phones or doing everything else that they often do. Let's see if there's anything else. Yes, we know we promised you 45 minutes plus a quick Q&A.
There's a question about the new counselor exam. How will that impact graduates' ability to obtain counseling positions? I don't think it's going to impact their ability to obtain counseling positions. It's going to impact as they get certified. But in regard to the certificate, in regard to the counseling positions, I don't think it's going to have much impact. The exam is at the moment, even as we speak, being developed, and it's going to be rolled out as appropriate in a couple of years. But I don't know if this is going to have any impact on counseling positions.
Yeah, Bob, I'll just add to that because I'm on the development committee. We have our next meeting May 19th. Again, we're still reviewing content. The content, if you go into the regulations, grad students, go into the content, you'll see that it mirrors KCREP, very specific around the 8 KCREP areas, which is the Council for the Accreditation of Counseling and Related Education Programs. So your program will prepare you for that. You take the exam for certification, not for a position. The target date is still spring 2023, but as Dr. Rotunda said, that's a long shot. So we'll see what happens. So 2023 for next year's graduates is when the exam is supposed to go into place. And let's see here. The social worker does not complete the IPR. True, Diara, but the social worker can deliver the curriculum. And so the social worker can deliver lessons, just like classroom teachers can deliver lessons. But the social worker does not do the IPR. I hope that helps. Okay, see if there are any more questions. And a shout out, I see Ray Polk.
I see lots of familiar faces. Yeah.
So Stephanie there today.
Yeah. So our next session is next Wednesday. There's other PDs that are available that are coming up. We have one on dating, abuse, and teen violence. And that's a webinar on the 12th, and then a careers in carpentry webinar on the 19th. We will be promoting those to everybody in the state. So we'll be sending home information, including certificates of attendance to this. As I said last week, if you need a certificate for CTLE credits, just email me at info@nisca.org. CTLE credits, info@nisca.org. I did a bunch of certificates last week. If you need one for this session, email me and we'll get it done. Any questions at this point?
Anything we've missed? Bob, there were a couple of questions about last week's session.
Yeah, I saw them.
And I know they were emailed to people who signed up. I don't know if eventually these will be on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, no, they're all on the YouTube channel already, even as we finish. And all of the information from last week is in a folder, and I'll put that in the email I send home where that folder is, so you can always go look back on last week's stuff. And it's all going to be there forever.
So the YouTube will show you, the NISCA YouTube channel has last week's webinar, this week's webinar, and then Bob and I will put together a folder of all of the materials. We'll just make sure at the end you have everything you need, because many of you right now are in that planning stage to revise, revisit, reflect on your program for next year. Thank you all, and especially thank you to our school administrators, and most importantly, thank you to our school principals for joining us today. If your principal wasn't with you today, share the webinar with them, folks. It's really up to us as school counselors to continue to educate our administrators. Remember, they're not getting the notices from state ed, but thank goodness for NISCA. They've done an extraordinary job of making sure we are well informed, and they've been going out there and finding grant money to fund 1,000,001 different PDs for us. So, Dr. Rotunda, we appreciate you.
Okay. See you next week.
Okay, folks, thank you.